The great council chamber of the citadel was older than the stars themselves. Its walls were made of polished obsidian that reflected the light of three distant suns. High above the floor, the elders sat on floating thrones. They were creatures of pure light and ancient wisdom, their faces hidden behind masks of silver filigree. Below them stood the representatives of 1,000 worlds, their voices filling the air with a low, nervous hum. At the center of the chamber stood High Commander Valen of the Krell Empire. He was a proud warrior, clad in armor made of midnight steel. His scales glistened under the bright lights, and his hand rested confidently on the hilt of his plasma blade. Krell had just conquered their 10th star system in less than a cycle, and their ambition knew no bounds. Valen had come before the council to announce their next target. We have found a new sector, Valen declared, his voice echoing off the obsidian walls. A rich sector filled with untouched minerals, rare gases, and fertile planets. It lies on the outer edge of the galaxy, a dark zone that has been ignored for too long. The Krell Empire claims it today. An old tired voice drifted down from the highest throne. It belonged to Prime Elder Aros, the oldest living being in the known universe. High Commander, you speak of Sector 44 Delta. You must turn your ships around. That space is not for you, nor is it for any of us. It must remain untouched. Valen smiled, a sharp, flashing movement of his lips. And why is that, honored elder? The primitive species living there have barely left their home world. They use primitive chemical rockets and communicate with slow radio waves. They are weak. They do not even possess shields or faster than light travel. They will fall to our vanguard in 3 planetary rotations. The great chamber grew terribly quiet. The ambient light seemed to dim, and a cold draft swept through the massive room. The elders did not look angry. They looked terrified. They are not weak, Elder Oros whispered, and though his voice was quiet, it carried the weight of a dying star. They are sleeping. The elders warned all who came before you. Do not awaken humanity. They are a species born from fire, chaos, and endless war. They fought themselves to the brink of death for thousands of years, and when they finally stopped, they chose to rest in the dark. If you touch their borders, you will not just start a war, you will end a galaxy. Valen laughed. It was a loud, mocking sound that shocked many of the smaller, peaceful diplomats in the hall. The Krell do not fear fairy tales, Elder. We do not stop our march because of old bedtime stories told to fright young hatchlings. If this humanity is as dangerous as you claim, let them face our plasma cannons. We will turn their home world into a glass ball and scatter their ashes across the void. They refuse to acknowledge our greatness, so we will show them our might. They do not refuse to acknowledge you, Elder Oro said softly, his silver mask tilting downward. In profound sadness, they do not even know you exist, and pray to the ancestors that they never do, for if they look up and see an enemy, they will not stop until everything you have ever built is gone. Valen did not listen. He turned his back on the High Council, a gesture of ultimate disrespect, and marched out of the chamber. His heavy boots clicked against the stone floor, a rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown to disaster. Behind him, the elders bowed their heads, and the lights of the citadel flickered as if a great shadow had just fallen over the future. The Krell battle fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system 3 weeks later. It was a magnificent sight. 200 dreadnoughts, their hulls glowing with green energy shields, formed a perfect crescent formation. Behind them were hundreds of troop carriers carrying millions of armored Krell warriors eager for blood and glory. Valen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Star Cleaver. He looked at the main view screen, which showed a small blue and green planet orbiting a common yellow star. The planet was called Earth. To Valen, it looked small, fragile, and utterly defenseless. Commander, his chief sensor officer reported, his tentacles moving quickly over the control panel. We have detected their communication network. It is just as the scouts reported, simple data packets, unencrypted radio waves, and rudimentary satellite grids. They have no planetary defense shields. They have no orbital weapon platforms. They have a small space station with only 6 individuals on board. A pathetic display. Valen muttered, send the Vanguard, destroy their space station first. Let them see their small achievements burn in the sky before we land our armies. I want them to know despair before they know death. The Vanguard, a group of 12 agile cruisers, broke away from the main fleet and sped toward Earth. They fired their heavy plasma cannons from long range. The human space station did not even have time to send a distress signal. In a flash of blinding light, the metal structure was torn apart, its pieces melting into the vacuum of space. Krell warriors on the bridges of their ships cheered, raising their fists in victory. It was too easy. On the surface of the planet, the humans did not understand what was happening at first. For centuries, they had looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone. They had spent decades fixing their own planet, ending their old wars, cleaning their oceans, and learning to live in peace. They had forgotten the brutal art of killing because they thought they would never need it again. They were peaceful, creative, and gentle. But deep inside their DNA, the old ghosts were still there. When the pieces of the shattered space station fell through the atmosphere, burning like angry red streaks across the night sky, the global networks went wild. Scientists around the world quickly realized this was not an accident. Then, the Krell fleet broadcasted a message across every television screen, radio frequency, and digital device on Earth. The face of Valen appeared, dark and menacing. People of Earth, his translated voice boomed, you are now subjects of the Krell Empire. Your resources belong to us. Your lives belong to us. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your cities. Drop your tools, bow your heads, and wait for your masters. The world went completely silent. In the grand cities of New York, Tokyo, London, and Nairobi, people stood still in the streets looking up at their screens. They did not cry, they did not panic. Instead, a strange collective feeling passed through billions of minds. It was a feeling they had not felt in a very long time. It was the feeling of survival in a deep underground bunker beneath the mountains of the northern continent. An old military command center was covered in dust. It had been closed 50 years ago when the world signed the Global Peace Treaty. The lights had been turned off, the computers unplugged, and the weapons locked away in deep vaults. An old general, a man with gray hair and sharp blue eyes named Marcus Vance, walked down the dark corridor. He had been called by the global leaders because he was one of the last men alive who remembered how the old world used to fight. He pushed open the heavy steel doors of the command center. A dozen young technicians were already there, trying to turn on the old machines. Their hands were shaking. They were used to programming weather satellites and agricultural drones, not weapons of war. General Vance, a young woman said, her voice trembling, the aliens, they just destroyed our orbital research platform. They killed 6 of our top scientists, and they are demanding we surrender the planet. Marcus Vance walked over to the main terminal. He looked at the data display. Playing the Crow fleet, he saw the numbers, the shield frequencies, the ship sizes. He took a deep breath and, for the first time in 50 years, the old fire in his chest woke up. They think we are weak because we are peaceful, Vance said, his voice calm and steady. They think because we stopped killing each other, we forgot how to kill. They do not know what we are. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old physical iron key. He walked to a small control box on the wall that was painted bright red. He inserted the key and turned it. Sir, the young technician asked, watching him with wide eyes. What is that? This is the Project Prometheus network, Vance replied. When we unified the world, we didn't destroy our weapons, we just buried them. Because the thinkers of that time knew that one day something from the dark might come looking for a fight. He flipped a heavy toggle switch. Deep beneath the oceans, inside silent mountain ranges, and under the shifting sands of deserts, massive steel doors began to grind open. Things that had been asleep for generations began to hum with power. Nuclear reactors flared to life. Automated assembly lines, dormant for decades, suddenly started moving, their robotic arms clicking into place to build things meant for destruction. High above the planet, Valen watched the view screen, waiting for the humans to send their leaders to beg for mercy. 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes, an hour. Commander, the sensor officer called out, his voice suddenly losing its confident tone. We are detecting massive energy readings from the planet's surface. Are they launching missiles? Valen asked, unconcerned. Our shields can deflect any primitive explosive they throw at us. No, sir, the officer said, his tentacles shaking violently. It is not missiles. The energy is not moving toward us. It is changing the planet itself. Look at the orbital trajectory. Valen leaned forward. On the screen, the blue planet seemed to change. Across the continents, massive hidden structures rose from the ground. They were thousands of meters long, made of heavy gray metal. They were not cities. They were kinetic mass drivers, colossal electromagnetic rails designed to shoot heavy iron slugs into space at a fraction of the speed of light. At the same time, the thousands of communication satellites that the Crow had laughed at did not send messages of surrender. Instead, they began to emit a powerful, blinding wave of static. The Krell communications went completely dead. Their sensor screens turned into a chaotic mess of white lines. What is happening? Valen shouted, gripping the edge of his command chair. Fix the sensors. We can't, sir. They are jamming everything. They are using their entire global power grid just to blind us. Then a sound vibrated through the hull of the Star Cleaver. It wasn't an explosion. It was the sound of something passing through space at impossible speeds. One of the Krell Vanguard cruisers simply vanished. There was no fireball, no slow breakup. a solid slug of depleted uranium, weighing 10,000 tons and traveling at 3%. The speed of light had struck the ship. Directly through its shields, the kinetic energy was so immense that the cruiser was turned into dust instantly. A second later, another cruiser exploded, then another, evasive maneuvers. Valen screamed, his pride instantly turning into cold panic. Fire on the ground coordinates, destroy those weapons, but the Krell ships could not aim. Their sensors were useless, blinded by the roar of humanity's awakening technology. The human mass drivers kept firing from the surface, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat of death. Every few seconds, another Krell ship was torn to pieces by invisible, silent kinetic slugs in the Citadel. Thousands of light years away, a sudden alarm began to chime. The great holographic map of the galaxy in the center of the room flared red, a small dot representing the Krell vanguard blinked once, twice, and then went completely dark. Representatives of the 1,000 worlds gasped. The Krell were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, yet their vanguard had been wiped out in minutes. Elder Aros opened his glowing eyes and looked at the empty space where Valen had stood just weeks before. Tear of light fell down his ancient cheek. The fools, the elder whispered to the silent chamber. They did not just kick a sleeping beast, they have broken the cage. Humanity has opened its eyes, and now the universe will remember why we hid from them in the dark. The bridge of the Star Cleaver was filled with smoke and the flashing red lights of emergency systems. High Commander Valen held onto his command console as another violent shudder shook his massive flagship. Outside the armored view screen, the remnants of his proud vanguard fleet were nothing more than glowing debris drifting aimlessly in the cold vacuum around the planet Earth. Report, Valen roared, his voice cracking with a mixture of anger and growing fear. How did they pierce our shields? They are primitives, sir. They are not using energy weapons. Chief Engineer shouted over the sound of blaring sirens. Our shields are designed to deflect plasma, lasers, and particle beams, but the humans are shooting raw heavy matter. They are throwing giant rocks and metal slugs at incredible speeds. The sheer kinetic force passes right through our energy grids and crushes our hulls. Valen stared at the tactical display. Out of the 12 advanced cruisers he had sent forward to teach the humans a lesson, none remained, and now the energy readings from the planet's surface were not decreasing, they were multiplying. Retreat, Valen ordered, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Pull the main fleet back to the outer edge of the system. Move behind the giant gas planet. We need time to analyze their weapons and recalibrate our defenses. The remaining 200 Krill dreadnoughts turned around, their massive sublight engines flaring bright blue as they fled from the blue and green world. For the first time in the history of the Krill Empire, a fleet was retreating from a species that had not even achieved faster-than-light travel down on Earth. Inside the deep bunker of Project Prometheus, the atmosphere was completely different. The air was thick with the smell of old ozone and hot electronic components, but the young technicians were no longer shaking. They were cheering. General Marcus Vance stood before the primary tactical screen, his face grim but defiant. They are running, he observed, watching the red dots on the display move away from Earth's orbital path. We did it, General, The young female technician cried out, wiping a tear of relief from her eye. We drove them off. No, Vance said, his voice dropping the celebration like a stone. We didn't drive them off, we just surprised them. They still have hundreds of large ships. Out there they have technology we don't understand, and they will be back once they figure out how to bypass our rail guns. This wasn't the war, this was just the opening alarm. He turned away from the screen and walked toward a secure communication station at the back of the bunker. Connect me to the United Earth Directorate. Tell them to activate the second phase. We need every factory, every shipyard, and every lab working around the clock. The peace is over. We are back in the manufacturing business. Within hours, the entire human planet transformed. The peaceful life that humans had enjoyed for generations disappeared, replaced by an industrial fury that only humanity could summon. The global economy was completely reorganized for production in the automated factories of Detroit, Stuttgart, and Shanghai. The assembly lines that had been making clean energy vehicles and medical equipment were reprogrammed in minutes. Massive robotic arms began welding thick plates of carbon steel armor. 3D printers began printing thousands of heavy missile casings. Humanity did not have a large star fleet, but they had millions of transport ships, mining vessels, and orbital cargo haulers in the high shipyards orbiting the moon. These peaceful ships were brought in by the hundreds. Engineers worked in zero gravity, cutting off civilian parts with plasma torches and bolting heavy armor and missile pods onto the hulls. They were not pretty ships, they were blocky, ugly, and brutal. But they were dangerous. Meanwhile, a brilliant young human scientist named Dr. Elena Rostova was looking at a piece of alien metal. A small fragment of a Krell drone had crashed into the Pacific Ocean after the battle, and it had been recovered by a fast submarine. She stood in a high-tech lab surrounded by glowing holographic projections of the alien material's atomic structure. A group of military officers stood behind her waiting for an answer. It is incredible, Dr. Rostova whispered, her fingers tracing the holographic lines. Their metal uses a strange molecular bond that we have never seen. It allows their ships to be light but stronger than anything we can make. And their engines, they use a contained antimatter reaction. That is how they travel between the stars. Can we copy it, Doctor? An officer asked urgently. Elena turned around, a sharp, determined look in her eyes. Copy it? No, we don't have the tools to replicate this from scratch in a few days, but we don't need to copy it. We can bridge it. Their systems use a very specific energy frequency to maintain their antimatter containment. If we modify our standard industrial lasers, we can disrupt that frequency. We don't need to break their armor if we can make their own engines explode from the inside. She smiled, a cold expression that would have made Valen very uncomfortable. They brought a highly advanced, delicate machine to a knife fight. We just need to show them how easy it is to break. Deep in the outer solar system, hidden behind the thick, stormy atmosphere of Jupiter, the Krell fleet had gathered. Valen was furious. He had sent messages back to the Krell homeworld demanding reinforcements, but the reply he received had been frustrating. The High Council of the Empire was hesitant. The news of the Vanguard's total destruction had sent shockwaves through the government, and the words of the elders were beginning to haunt the Krell. Politicians, they tell me to wait. Valen hissed to his officers on the bridge, they tell me to negotiate with. The primitives, the Krell do not negotiate with insects. We have modified our shields, our engineers have added thick physical barrier fields to the front of our ships. The next time those human railguns fire, the metal slugs will hit our barrier fields and shatter. Before they touch our hulls, he looked out at his fleet. They had repaired their damage and were ready for revenge. Set course for Earth, maximum speed. We will not use a vanguard this time. We will advance as one single crushing wall. We will wipe out their orbital defenses before they can reload. The Krell fleet accelerated, moving out from the shadow of Jupiter. They flew past Mars, ignoring the small human research stations on the red planet, and headed straight for Earth. As they approached, Valen looked at his tactical sensors. He expected to see the humans hiding behind their planetary railguns. Instead, he saw something else. A vast fleet of ships had moved away from Earth and was waiting for them near the moon. There were over 500 vessels. They were mismatched, irregular, and lacked any uniform design. Some were modified asteroid miners, others were massive fuel tankers converted into missile platforms, and among them were hundreds of small agile fighter craft that looked like angry hornets. They are coming out to meet us, Valen said, genuinely surprised. With those rust buckets, they have no shield. A single blast from our main cannons will melt those civilian hulls. Commander, the sensor officer warned, the human fleet is accelerating. They are not forming a defensive line. They are charging directly at us. Fire at will, Valen ordered. Destroy their fleet. The Krell dreadnoughts opened fire. Hundreds of bright green plasma beams cut through the darkness of space, striking the advancing human ships. When the beams hit, many of the modified human transport ships simply vaporized. The civilian hulls could not withstand the alien heat, but the humans did not stop. They did not turn back when their comrades died. They kept coming, using the burning wrecks of their own ships as shields to block the oncoming fire. They are insane, a Krell pilot whispered, watching a human cargo ship, its engine compartment completely on fire, continue to accelerate directly toward a Krell cruiser. The human ship, named the Iron Horse, rammed the Krell cruiser at full speed. The impact was horrific. The heavy unshielded mass of the human ship crushed the front of the Krell cruiser, forcing both ships to spin out of control and explode in a massive fireball. Then the human fighters arrived. They were too small and fast for the heavy Krell cannons to track. They swarmed over the giant dreadnoughts, firing thousands of small, specialized missiles. The missiles are not damaging our hulls, sir, the Krell defense officer reported, feeling a wave of relief. Their explosives are too weak. But on the bridge of the Star Cleaver, Valen noticed something wrong. The red lights on his engine console began to flicker. Why is our power dropping? He demanded. Suddenly an explosion rocked the back of his ship. Commander, the engineer screamed in absolute terror. The human missiles, they didn't carry explosives. They carried high-intensity frequency emitters. They have found a way to disrupt our antimatter containment fields. Our own engines are becoming unstable. Across the battlefield, the advanced Krell Dreadnoughts began to fail, one by one. Their brilliant green shields flickered and died. Internal power lines blew out, leaving the massive warships dark and helpless in space, and that was exactly when the human railguns on Earth fired. Again, without their shields and barrier fields, the helpless Krell ships were completely exposed. The heavy uranium slugs arrived like a storm of iron rain, punching through the elegant Krell hulls. From side to side, the beautiful alien fleet was being systematically dismantled by raw, primitive violence. Valen watched in horror as his proud armada was torn to shreds around him. He realized then that the elders had been right. Humanity was not just a species. They were a force of nature. They did not care about the rules of advanced galactic warfare. If they needed to fight, they would use whatever they had. Their ships, their bodies, their very world to destroy their enemy. Get us out of here, Valen screamed, his pride completely broken, jumped to hyperspace. Now, the Star Cleaver, heavily damaged and trailing green fire, managed to activate its faster-than-light drive. It slipped into the safety of hyperspace, accompanied by only a dozen broken, battered survivors of what had been the greatest fleet in the Krell Empire. Back in the Citadel, the Great Council chamber was silent once more. The holographic map showed the terrifying reality. The Krell fleet had been completely routed. Elder Oros looked at the representatives of the galaxy. The Krell have failed, he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. And now, humanity knows that there is life beyond their star. They know that this life is hostile. The sleeping beast is fully awake, and it is looking up at the sky. The Star Cleaver dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Krell home system. The proud flagship was barely recognizable. Its beautiful hull was torn open in multiple places. Its green energy arrays were dark, and a long trail of radioactive debris followed it through the void of the massive armada that High Commander Valen had led to Sector 44 Delta. Only 6 other damaged ships managed to limp back with him. Inside the planetary palace of the Krell Emperor, the mood was one of absolute fury and panic. Emperor Zoltan sat on his high throne, his golden scales vibrating with rage as Valen knelt before him on the marble floor. You lost an entire battle fleet to primitives, Zoltan roared, his voice shaking the massive pillars of the throne room. An empire that has conquered 1,000 worlds, defeated by creatures who use chemical rockets and metal slugs. How is this possible? Valen did not lift his head. Your Majesty, they are not ordinary creatures. The elders were right. We thought they were weak because they were peaceful, but their peace was a choice. When we attacked them, they changed instantly. They do not care about their own lives. They use their transport ships as weapons, and they figured out how to turn our own power sources against us in a matter of days. Their rate of adaptation is impossible. I do not care about their adaptation, the Emperor screamed. The Krell Empire does not accept defeat. We will mobilize the Grand Army. We will build 1,000 more ships. We will call upon our allies in the galactic hegemony. We will wipe this humanity from the face of the universe before they become a threat to our borders. Before Valen could answer, the heavy doors of the throne room burst open. High-ranking communications officer ran into the room, his face pale with terror. He did not even bow to the Emperor before speaking, Your Majesty. Clears throat. Emergency broadcast from our outer sensor stations, the officer shouted, holding a data tablet with trembling hands. The humans, they are here, the Emperor. Froze. Valen spun around, his eyes wide. With disbelief, that is impossible. They do not have faster than light technology. It would take them decades to travel from their system to ours, using sublight engines. They didn't build FTL drives. Officer stammered, pulling up a holographic projection in the center of the room. They took the engines from the cruisers we lost in their system. They reverse-engineered our hyperdrives, bolted them onto their own ships, and followed our hyperspace tracks. They are entering our system right now. The holographic screen flared to life, showing the orbital space around the Krell home planet. Visra, a massive tear in space, appeared, glowing with purple energy. Out of the rift emerged a fleet that looked like it had been pulled from a nightmare. These were not the civilian transport ships the Krell had fought near the moon. These were the new creations of a fully mobilized Earth. They were colossal, blocky warships, painted a dark matte black that absorbed the light of the stars. They had no elegant lines or decorative features. They were built for one purpose only: absolute devastation. Their hulls were covered in thick layers of heavy armor, and massive missile bay lined their sides. At the front of each ship was the gaping maw of a planetary-scale mass driver. Leading the fleet was a massive command vessel, 3 times the size of any Krell dreadnought. Painted on its side in bold white letters was the name USS Vengeance. On the bridge of the U.S. Vengeance, General Marcus Vance stood behind the primary command console. Beside him was Dr. Elena Ristova, who was monitoring the alien system's energy readings. We have arrived at the Krell coordinates. General Vance's operations officer reported. Their planetary defense grid is activating. They have 3 orbital stations and dozens of defense platforms powering up. Vance nodded slowly. They chose this path when they destroyed our research station and killed our people. They thought they could attack us and remain safe in their distant homes. We are here to show them that distance cannot save them from humanity's wrath. He looked at Alina. Is the network ready, Doctor? Ready, General, she replied, tapping her console. We have integrated the antimatter disruption frequencies we discovered into our main energy arrays. Their orbital stations won't be able to hold their power grids for more than a few minutes. Open fire, Vance commanded calmly. The human fleet did not hesitate. The front of the USS Vengeance lit up with a brilliant, blinding light as its massive electromagnetic rails fired. A solid slug of tungsten, the size of a building, shot through space at 5% the speed of light. It struck the first Krell orbital defense station before the aliens could even register the launch. The kinetic impact was so violent that the station did not just shatter, it compressed into a ball of twisted metal and exploded, scattering debris across the atmosphere of the planet below. At the same time, the other human warships unleashed thousands of long-range missiles. These missiles did not just carry explosives, they carried the disruption fields designed by Alina's team. As they exploded near the Krell defense platforms, the alien systems began to fail, their shields dropping and their weapons going dark. Down on the surface of Visra, millions of Krell Citizens looked up at the sky in absolute horror. For thousands of years they had watched broadcasts of their armies conquering other worlds. They had celebrated the strength of the Krell Empire. They had believed they were the masters of the galaxy. Now their sky was falling. The burning pieces of their defense stations fell like meteors, crashing into the oceans and mountains, causing massive earthquakes and tidal waves. The dark, terrifying shapes of the human warships filled the upper atmosphere, casting a shadow over the entire capital city. Inside the palace, Emperor Zoltan watched the destruction of his defenses on his screens. His anger had completely vanished, replaced by a cold, paralyzing fear. Where is our fleet? He demanded. Where are the guards? The guards are dead, Your Majesty, Valen said quietly, his voice hollow. He knew it was over. He had seen what humanity could do when they were angry, and now that anger was directed at their home. Suddenly, the primary communications console in the throne room turned on. The Krell symbols disappeared, replaced by a visual feed from the USS Vengeance. The face of General Marcus Vance appeared on the screen. His expression was hard as stone, his eyes cold and unforgiving. He looked directly at the Krell Emperor. I am General Marcus Vance of the United Earth Directorate, he said, his voice translated perfectly into the Krell language. You attacked our world without provocation. You murdered our people. You demanded our surrender. You believed we were weak because we chose to live in peace. The Emperor tried to speak to assert his royal authority, but Vance continued, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. We did not want this war, Vance said. We spent centuries burying our weapons so we could build a better world, but you chose to dig them up. You wanted to see humanity's true face, and now you're looking at it. We are not here to conquer you. We do not want your resources, and we do not want your land. We are here to ensure that you can never ever threaten our world again. What do you want? The Emperor finally managed to shout, his voice trembling. Do you want us to surrender? We will pay you tributes. We will give you gold, slaves, star systems. We do not want your gold, and we do not accept slaves, Vance replied coldly. We demand the total disarmament of the Krell Empire. You will dismantle every warship, close every military academy, and destroy every weapon factory. If you refuse, we will turn your home planet into an empty graveyard. The Emperor looked at Valen, then at his remaining advisors. They all knew that if they accepted these terms, the Krell Empire would be finished. They would be helpless at the mercy of the other species they had conquered in the past. Never, the Emperor roared, trying to reclaim his pride. The Krell will never bow to primitives. We will fight you in the streets. We will fight you until the last warrior falls. General Vance didn't look surprised. He didn't even look angry. He simply reached out his hand and pressed a button on his console. So be it, Vance said, and the screen went black. A second later, the human fleet began its orbital bombardment. They did not fire on the civilian cities. They were not monsters. Instead, they targeted every military base, every shipyard, every weapon depot, and every power plant on the planet. The ground shook as thousands of kinetic slugs struck the surface. The explosions were so massive they could be seen from space, bright orange scars tearing across the landscape of Visra. The Krell military infrastructure, built over thousands of years, was systematically wiped out in a matter of hours. The message was clear: humanity did not just want to win a battle, they wanted to erase the very capacity for war from their enemy. In the Citadel, far away, the representatives of the galactic hegemony sat in total silence as they watched the live data streams from the Krell system. The great empire was being destroyed before their eyes, not by a galactic superpower, but by a single species from an ignored sector. Elder Oros closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. The Krell are gone, he said softly, and now the galaxy must face the consequences of their arrogance. The humans have tasted the blood of their enemies, and they have realized how small the universe truly is. The age of peace is over. The destruction of the Krell Empire's military power sent a shockwave through the entire known galaxy. Planets that had lived under the Krell's cruel rule for centuries suddenly found themselves free. But they were not celebrating, they were terrified. A new power had risen from the dark edges of space, a species that had defeated one of the greatest military armadas in the universe in a matter of weeks. In the Citadel, the leaders of the galactic hegemony met in an emergency session. The hegemony was a union of three powerful species: the Centauri, a race of tall, elegant politicians; the Valeri, a proud warrior species with feathered wings; and the Zeth, cybernetic beings who valued logic above all else. Together with the ancient elders, they had maintained order in the galaxy for 10,000 years. Now that order was broken. We must strike them now, High Commander Thorn of the Valari declared, slamming his fist onto his council table. He was a massive creature with bright red feathers and armor made of gold. The humans have advanced into our space. They have destroyed the Krell. If we do not stop them now, they will march on the Citadel itself. We must assemble the Grand Coalition fleet and crush them before they secure their hold on the Krell systems. And how do you propose we do that? Ambassador Liara of the Centauri asked, her voice calm but laced with worry. The Krell were our most aggressive warriors, and their fleet was turned into scrap metal in days. The data we gathered shows that human technology adapts at a speed we cannot match. They're using our own hyperdrives against us, and their kinetic weapons bypass our standard defenses entirely. A direct attack might just provoke them further. Logic suggests a defensive posture. The Zeth representative buzzed, his mechanical eye spinning. Humanity has not attacked any hegemony worlds yet. They only targeted the Krell because the Krell attacked them first. If we establish a quarantine zone around Sector 44 Delta and the former Krell territories, we can contain them while we develop countermeasures against their kinetic weaponry. The debate raged for hours, voices rising in anger and fear. The representatives of 1,000 smaller worlds watched from the lower tiers, wondering if their civilizations would survive the coming storm. Finally, Prime Elder Oros rose from his high throne. The entire chamber went silent. Instantly, the light around the Elder seemed dim, reflecting his deep sorrow. You still do not understand, Elder Oros said, his voice echoing through the massive hall. You speak of quarantine zones and coalitions as if you are dealing with a normal empire. You think this is a matter of territory, resources, or political power. It is not. He looked down at the Valari commander. The Krell did not just take territory. They destroyed a human research station. They killed human individuals who were seeking knowledge and peace. 2. Humanity, that is not a political dispute, it is a crime against their species. They did not come to conquer the Krell, they came to punish them, and they will do the same to any who stand in their way. Are you saying we should just surrender to these primitives? Thorn shouted, his feathers bristling with pride. I am saying you should not have ignored our warnings, Oros replied. Softly, the elders told you for generations do not awaken humanity. We knew what they were capable of because we saw them fight during the first dawn. Before this hegemony was even formed. They are a species of extremes. When they love, they build magnificent wonders. When they fight, they become the hand of death itself. You cannot negotiate with their anger, and you cannot stop their march with walls. He turned his back on the council. Hegemony has chosen to view them as an enemy, therefore they will become your enemy. May your ancestors have mercy on your souls, for humanity will have none. While the hegemony debated, the human fleet did not rest. General Marcus Vance had established a forward command base in the ruins of the Krell orbital shipyards, human engineers working alongside thousands of liberated Krell slaves who had volunteered to help were transforming the facility into a massive production center. The USS Vengeance sat at the center of the fleet, surrounded by dozens of new warships that were being built using the refined materials from the Krell mines. Humanity was no longer just adapting, they were innovating. Dr. Alina Rostova walked into General Vance's briefing room, holding a glowing data drive. Her eyes were tired but bright with excitement. General, she said, plugging the drive into the main table, a holographic map of the galaxy appeared with thousands of star systems glowing in different colors. We have successfully downloaded the Krell Central Database. We now have a complete map of the galactic hegemony. Vance looked at the map. He saw the vast territories of the Centauri, the Valyri, and the Zeth. He saw the Citadel, the massive space station that served as the capital of the galaxy. It was located in the central system, surrounded by heavy defense webs. They have a massive empire, Vance remarked, his voice steady. And according to our long-range sensors, they are moving ships. The Valyri and the Centauri are forming a massive fleet near the border system of Xylos. It looks like they are preparing for an invasion. They are terrified, General Alina said. They saw what we did to the Krell and they think we are going to conquer them next. They don't understand that we just want to be left alone. Then we need to show them that attacking us is a fatal mistake, Vance said, his jaw tightening. We showed the Krell our strength, but the hegemony clearly needs a demonstration as well. If they assemble that fleet at Xylos, we will destroy it before it can launch. But General, Alina countered gently, if we attack their coalition fleet, we will be at war with the entire galaxy. There are trillions of them and only billions of us. We can't fight a war against 1,000 worlds at the same time. Vance walked over to the viewport, looking out at the dark expanse of space. We don't have to fight 1,000 worlds, Doctor. We just have to break their will to fight. The hegemony is built on the belief that they are superior, that their technology and their ancient history make them invincible. We need to shatter that belief completely. We need to strike them so hard and so fast that the very idea of fighting humanity fills them with terror. He turned back to her, his blue eyes flashing with determination. Prepare the new weapon systems. We are moving the fleet to Xylos. If the galaxy wants to see what happens when they refuse to acknowledge humanity, we will show them. 3 days later, the Xylos system was filled with the greatest collection of military power the galaxy had seen in a millennia. The grand coalition fleet of the hegemony had gathered. Over 2,000 warships from 100 different species formed a massive shimmering grid across the system. There were elegant Centauri cruisers, heavily armored Valari dreadnoughts, and glowing Zeth capital ships. High Commander Thorn stood on the bridge of his flagship, the glory of Valeria. He looked at the massive fleet under his command and felt a deep sense of pride. No one could defeat this armada. The humans would be crushed like dust beneath his boots. Commander, his sensor officer called out, his voice tense. We have a massive gravitation anomaly detected at the edge of the system. Multiple hyperspace tiers are opening. Form defensive lines, Thorn ordered, his voice booming through the communications network. Prepare all plasma rays, let them come. The space at the edge of the Xylos system tore open and the human fleet emerged. There were only 200 ships, a tenth of the size of the hegemony fleet. They looked small and insignificant compared to the massive armada waiting for them. Thorn laughed over the open fleet channel. Is this all they brought? They think they can defeat the entire galaxy with a handful of blocky metal crates. Destroy them. The hegemony fleet advanced. A massive wave of light and energy, thousands of plasma cannons, laser arrays, and particle beams fired simultaneously, creating a blinding curtain of death that raced toward the human ships. But General Vance did not move. He stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching the oncoming storm. Activate the Aegis grid, Vance ordered. The human warships did not try to dodge. Instead, they moved into a tight interlocking formation. From the sides of each ship, a new kind of energy barrier flared to life. It was a projection field designed by Dr. Rostova, combining human magnetic technology with the Krell's antimatter containment fields. When the massive hegemony barrage struck the human grid, the space around the ships warped. The plasma beams and lasers did not melt the hulls. They were caught in the magnetic fields and bent away, scattered harmlessly into the empty void. The human fleet emerged from the blinding light completely untouched. Thorn's laughter died in his throat. How did they survive that? Fire again. Increase power to maximum. Our turn. General Vance said quietly. Fire the Nova-class railguns. Target their command structures. New human warships were equipped with massive upgraded mass drivers that used the energy of captured Krell antimatter reactors. When they fired, the slugs did not just travel fast, they traveled at nearly 10% the speed of light. The sound of the firing was a deep, terrifying vibration that could be felt through the metal hulls of the human ships. Across the system, 30 hegemony capital ships simply exploded into clouds of expanding gas. The kinetic slugs passed through their advanced shields as if they weren't even there, tearing through the metal structures and detonating their fuel cores instantly. Before the hegemony could react, the human fighters swarmed out, thousands of small automated drones that flew with Impossible speed. They didn't target the hulls, they targeted the engines and communication dishes, using precision. Electronic warfare to blind and disable. The alien warships, the battle turned into a slaughter in minutes. The hegemony fleet, for all its size and history, could not cope with the sheer brutality and speed of the human attack. Their lines broke, ships colliding with one another as they tried to escape the relentless kinetic bombardment. Thorn watched in absolute horror as his beautiful fleet was systematically dismantled around him. His flagship was shaking violently, its shields gone, its engines failing. He realized then that the elders had not been exaggerating. Humanity was not just a species, they were an apocalypse. Retreat, Thorn screamed into his dead microphone, but there was no one left to hear him. The Grand Coalition was gone, turned into a vast field of burning metal and drifting bodies in the cold, silent dark of Xylos. The Xylos system had become a vast graveyard of galactic pride. The burning remnants of 2,000 hegemony warships cast an eerie, flickering orange light over the frozen moons of the system. The human fleet, still largely intact and glowing with the quiet energy of their advanced shields, stood like silent sentinels over the destruction. News of the total annihilation of the Grand Coalition fleet reached the Citadel within minutes. The capital of the galaxy was thrown into complete chaos. Politicians fled their offices, wealthy diplomats boarded private transports to escape to the outer rims, and the citizens of 1,000 worlds filled the streets in terror, waiting for the sky to burn. Inside the great council chamber, the remaining leaders of the hegemony sat in darkness. High Commander Thorn was gone, his ship destroyed at Xylos. The representatives of the Centauri and the Zegarth looked like broken ghosts, their confidence and arrogance completely erased. The heavy doors of the chamber opened, but it was not an elder who walked in. It was a human holographic projection. The massive form of General Marcus Vance appeared in the center of the room. He was not wearing ceremonial robes or a crown. He was in his dusty, worn military uniform, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. He looked at the terrified counselors. The fleet you built to destroy us is gone, Vance said, his voice calm, cold, and echoing through the massive obsidian hall. We told you we wanted peace. We told you to leave us alone, but you refused to acknowledge our right to exist without your permission. You believe that because you were old and numerous, you owned the stars. Ambassador Liara of the Centauri stood up, her hands shaking as she faced the projection. General, please, we admit our mistake. We acknowledge humanity. We acknowledge your power, your sovereignty, your territory. We will grant you a permanent seat on the High Council. We will give you whatever you want, just do not destroy our worlds. Vance let out a short, humorless laugh. Seat on your council. We do not want to sit in your chamber and argue about borders. We do not want your permission to exist. We have earned that right through our own survival. He stepped closer to the projection lens, his image growing larger and more intense. We are not going to destroy your worlds. We are not monsters, but the galactic hegemony is finished. From this day forward, you do not dictate the laws of this galaxy. You do not tell any species whether they are allowed to look up at the stars. What do you demand of us? The Zeth representative buzzed, his mechanical voice flat with defeat. Toll. Disarmament of the central hegemony. Vance stated, every world will maintain. Only local police forces, all military. Shipyards will be placed under human supervision. The Citadel will remain a center for peaceful trade and diplomacy. But its guns will be removed. If any species attempts to build a warship, or if any fleet crosses into another species' territory without permission, humanity will return, and we will not stop until that species is removed from history. The counselors bowed their heads. They had no choice. They had no weapons left to fight and no allies to call upon. The old order that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years had fallen. In less than 2 months, the holographic projection of Vance faded away, leaving the room in a heavy, suffocating silence. Prime Elder Oros, who had remained quiet throughout the entire meeting, slowly stood up from his high throne. He removed his silver filigree mask for the first time in millennia, revealing an ancient, deeply wrinkled face filled with profound sadness and wisdom. The warning is fulfilled, Oros said softly, his voice carrying to every corner of the dark room. They have awakened, and now they are the masters of the stars. Go to your homes, tell your people to dismantle their weapons, and pray that we never give them a reason to look at us with anger again. 5 years passed. The galaxy had changed completely, entering a period known as the Great Silence. The old wars that had plagued the star systems for generations had stopped entirely. No pirate fleets dared to raid the trade lanes, and no ambitious empire attempted to conquer its neighbors. The universe was peaceful, but it was a peace born from absolute fear. High above the planet Earth, a massive new structure had been built. It was the Gateway Station, a beautiful sprawling ring of silver, metal, and glass that orbited the blue and green world. It was not a military fortress, but a center for science, trade, and exploration. Dr. Elena Rostova stood in an observation lounge, looking out through a massive glass window at the stars. She was older now, her hair touched with streaks of gray, but her eyes were peaceful. Beside her stood General Marcus Vance, now retired from active duty, clad in civilian clothes. Look at them, Elena said, pointing toward a docking bay below. A fleet of elegant Centauri transport ships was unloading rare medical supplies and agricultural goods, while a group of young human and Valeri scientists walked together along a glass corridor, sharing data pads and laughing. It is hard to believe that 5 years ago we were burning their ships, Vance said quietly, his hands resting in his pockets. We did what we had to do to survive. Marcus, Elena replied, they didn't understand peace because they had never faced an equal. They thought peace was something the strong granted to the weak. We had to show them that peace is a mutual respect, earned through the knowledge of what happens when it is broken. And do you think they have truly learned? Vance asked, looking toward the distant stars where the former hegemony worlds lay. They have, Elena smiled, because they know that deep in the dark humanity is still watching. We have gone back to our old lives. We are building cities, exploring new worlds, and making art. We are peaceful again. She turned to look at him, her expression turning serious. But they also know that if anyone ever tries to put us in a cage again, if anyone ever refuses to acknowledge that every living thing has the right to be free, the fire is still there, and we will not hesitate to burn the universe to keep our home safe. Vance smiled, a gentle, relaxed expression that he could never have worn. During the war, he looked down at the blue planet below, vibrant and full of life, protected by the very stars that had once threatened to destroy it. The elders had warned the galaxy not to awaken humanity. The galaxy had refused to listen, and in their arrogance they had brought about their own end. But out of the ashes of that old, cruel empire, a new universe had been born, one where the strong did not crush the weak and where the stars belonged to all who dared to look up at them in peace. Humanity had returned to its sleep, but its eyes were forever open, a silent promise of protection for the galaxy they had saved from itself.